Oxford from the inside. The good, the bad, but always the truth.
Hello and welcome to Oxford from the Inside, the good, the bad, but always the truth. I'm your host Ellis, and today I'm joined by Immy. Immy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Immy and I'm a history and French student at Trinity.
Lovely.
Oh, and I'm a third year, so I'm on my year.
So today we're going to be talking about your experience at interviews. So do you want to explain what course you interviewed for, first of all?
Yeah, so I interviewed for history and modern languages, but French as the modern language. And the course is 50-50 split between history and French. So you've got French language and literature on one side of the degree and any history module you choose on the other side. So what you can do is you can make it a very history and French focused degree, so choosing French history. If you want to, I've actually chosen to keep mine mostly separate. So I did, for example, I did like 300 to 900 AD history and modern European socialism in my first year, and French was just completely different from that. It's 13th century, 18th, 19th century, so didn't really have anything to do with it. But I did find this year I've done a lot of early modern history and early modern French, and that's actually tied in really well together. So it's quite useful actually doing both of them together as well, but you can choose what you want to do.
Yeah, because in first year with French you don't get any choice at all over what you study. No, you just get kind of given a course, and that's you have to just make do with that. Whereas in history do you choose your modules?
Yeah, history you can choose whatever you want. You have to have certain modules that you need to do. But actually I've got a lot more choice than most people because I had the French side as well. History students, they have to do certain courses, but I could pick and choose within those courses what I wanted to do. So actually I think I've got a little bit more freedom.
Nice. So before interviews, what was your biggest concern?
Is that I wasn't going to be prepared enough. They were going to ask me really silly questions, and I would make a complete fool of myself and wouldn't know what I was talking about and maybe cry. None of this happened. So I think also there's such a thing as preparing too much, because what you want to really do is be able to respond to the questions that they ask you and not have preconceived questions that you've prepared for in your head, that you go in thinking, oh, I want to talk about this. You just need to go with the flow, and you can lead the discussion, but just answer the questions they ask you. Don't worry about being too much, about showing off everything you know. It's more just seeing how you can think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's good to go in knowing sort of why you're there. I think the question I kind of prepared for most was going why do I want to study French? What would I answer to that question? But anything else,
I didn't actually get asked that.
No, me neither, which I think they probably avoid asking you the most obvious questions because
they know you want to be there.
And for sure.
That also comes across in your personal statement as well. So they've already had, they already sort of know why you want to do it, and now they want to basically see what you're like, because maybe someone else could have written your personal statement. You don't know. It's only when you actually get to meet someone that you get to figure out what they're like, how they think, and what they're really interested in.
Yeah, definitely. And as well, I'm sure they can kind of tell as well when they interview you whether you're genuine. Because I think that's what they want most of all, is you to genuinely want to be there rather than just banging an application.
And that's one thing as well that's really important, being genuine. So what you've said on your personal statement, make sure it's true. So you may not have read all of the books. I hadn't read all of the books that I put on my personal statement by the time I wrote it, but I certainly had my interviews, and I'd have been a bit stuffed if I hadn't, because they asked me about the books, some of the books and things I put on my personal statement. So yeah, make sure that what you write on there is actually true, because you will get caught out.
Yeah, I had exactly the same thing, where I was asked about, I'd put 2 books on my personal statement. One of them I knew really well, and one of them, like, I'd read a while back, like I hadn't really revisited it at the time. And the man who interviewed me actually asked, like, which one I'd prefer to talk about, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
thank goodness. But yeah, definitely be honest, like make sure that you read stuff. You mentioned about being worried about being asked silly questions.
Yeah.
Had you heard any like horror stories before you went?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one thing I'd heard, so I heard several. So one that you walk in and there's no chair, and they're testing to see what you're going to do. Are you going to go and ask if there's a chair? How are you going to stand up and feel awkward the whole interview? I don't know if this actually happens. And another one where someone went in and all of the furniture was just on the tables, out of the way. There's nothing to sit on. So those two, I suppose, are related to each other. But I think those are just horror stories. I don't actually think they're true. Certainly everyone I've spoken to at interviews and since, they've just had a fairly normal experience. You go into a room, you have 2 tutors, you sit usually in front of them, maybe on a sofa or an armchair or something, and you have a nice chat. Well, it's an intellectual discussion, and they just want to know how you're thinking, and what your thinking style is and how you're going to think through problems. They aren't trying to catch you out.
Yeah, definitely. I think a horror story I heard was someone sort of like walking into the interview. The interviewer is sat down, and the interviewer asks, "How tall am I?" Just from being sat down. And the person asks, "Well, can you stand up?" No. How tall am I? Which again, I don't think it's true. Or
Yeah.
I think it's something that's been passed down from like interviewee to interviewee, and it's probably been massively inflated.
There are questions out there. I know someone who got asked, who was a philosophy student, whether plants had feelings. And yeah, so there will be questions like that to catch you up, but it's not, they don't want you to give they don't care if it's the right answer or not. They just want to see how you're going to think through the problems. How do you tell whether plants have feelings? You talk through and that sort of thing.
Yeah, which I think as well, like there's stuff that's specific to the course that you want to study. So obviously if you're kind of going in for, say, French, I don't think you're going to get that kind of like outlandish question. It's a lot more normal. I suppose maybe for history they could come up with, to kind of like, oh well, what's the reason for this historical event happening, perhaps.
Well, I got asked in my history interview whether I thought Stalin was justified, so I ended up actually defending Stalin in my history interview, which wasn't something I thought I'd actually end up doing.
Wow.
It does lead you down strange paths.
Though, like you said, I was surprised by how casual the interview was. Like, it is quite like a relaxed atmosphere. Like they don't expect. Go on.
It's supposed to emulate the tutorial system we've got at Oxford. So you have 1 or 2 students and your tutor. So all they want to do is see if you'll be able to actually do well in the Oxford system, and because they're testing whether you'll be able to think through problems like you will in an actual tutorial. So that's what it is, really. It's not, I'm here purely to punish you and make you feel terrible. It's, will you actually do well at Oxford?
Yeah, because by the time you actually get to having an interview, they kind of know that you're good enough. And then it's kind of about testing whether you have like a rapport with the tutors, because so often
have to be that individual tutor.
No,
how you cope in those sorts of one-on-one, 1-on-2 conversations.
Yeah, definitely. So would you like to talk us through your actual kind of like interview experience? So how many you had, like what kind of things happened in them?
Yeah, so I only actually ended up having 2 interviews. So I had one for French, one for history. And so you arrive there, and then got there late on Tuesday evening, and we had breakfast, and Wednesday morning they put up a big list of when our interviews were and at what times. I do feel sorry for the person who had theirs 9 a.m. on Wednesday morning, straight after breakfast.
Yeah.
But I was quite lucky, and I had both of mine, one Thursday morning, one Thursday afternoon. And so for French, so there's interview helpers who take you there so you don't get lost. And took me up there. I had 20 minutes in a room with a dictionary to look through a passage. And ironically, so they give you a dictionary because it doesn't matter. Not everyone's French is at the same standard. So that way it's equal for everyone. But even there's things in the dictionary that you can't always find. So mine, it was a passage about tulips, but I didn't know it was actually about tulips. There were odd words like solitaire and things, which is actually a type of tulip. So I looked that up in the dictionary, hoping it was going to be helpful, but it wasn't. And yeah, so they asked me then about the text. I started analysing what this solitaire meant, that it must be this precious jewel to the author of the text. Turns out it was only a tulip, and I got that completely wrong, but that didn't really matter. They just wanted to know how I thought through the problem. And then we talked about, we didn't talk about my personal statement that much. We just talked about one of the books I'd read. So I read Germinal by Zola, and they just asked me to analyse the ending and how I thought, or what I thought about the ending. So again, yeah, make sure you've actually read the book, because you really, you don't want to turn out and go, oh well, actually sorry, I didn't get to the end of that, despite saying my personal statement how great the book was. Yeah.
Oh god, I can imagine just how painful that would be if you were in that situation. Like, it would be so rough. Just don't do that.
Yeah, just don't. No. And then lastly, you have a bit at the end where they just test your speaking. It doesn't matter if it's not fantastic, because you've got your year abroad to help your French, or whatever language you're doing. So just spoke in French for about 5 minutes at the end, and they asked me about my year abroad and what I was getting up to. That was just a really nice, relaxed chat. And history, again, was fairly relaxed. We went in, they completely ignored my personal statement. And we talked about one of the essays I'd written, the one on Stalin. I obviously ended up defending Stalin, but despite that, so despite getting the tulip question, tulip completely out of context, and defending Stalin, I still did very well at interviews. So it goes to show, I think, that there definitely isn't the right answer, and they're not looking for a one type of student who's going to answer things in one particular way. They're just looking at, how do you react based on a question? And when asked further questions, so you may know something, you can lead the discussion, but then they'll prod you and poke you to see where you end up going and how you end up thinking. So yeah, just don't stress. And it's just try and have a normal chat.
Yeah, I think a lot of people go in feeling like they really have to prove themselves to be like an expert in their subject, but that's just not at all what they're looking for. Even, like you said, when you have an actual just chat in French, it's 5 minutes, and it's not like asking you about really deep concepts. It's just,
They asked me, because at the end of my personal statement, I was living in Spain at the time, and I'd said, we're just really enjoying going out to bars and chatting with Spanish natives. So we ended up speaking about what I'd end up doing, what was my favorite thing about Madrid, that sort of thing. So it was a very relaxed chat. They aren't seeking to make you uncomfortable.
Yeah. And as well, I kind of had a similar experience where I interviewed for French and beginner's German. And I think I had 2 interviews for beginner's German and 1 interview for French. And my first beginner's German interview was literally, I got given a passage in German, but it was really simple. It was like, my name is X, I have 3 brothers, I go to university and study blah blah blah. So if you've kind of put a bit of work in beforehand to learn like basic German words, it was quite easy. And there was a native German speaker who read it out, and they asked me to read it out after him and then translate what it said, which sounds horrible before you go, but I think with a beginner's language, they kind of expect you to have started learning like bits and bobs, even like literally Duolingo level like knowledge.
Well, it's just to show that you've got the interest there in the first place, isn't it?
Yeah, because I think it would be wrong to go to an interview for a beginner's language and be like, well, I've not started yet.
Yeah.
And I had the same thing where for my French interview, I had 20 minutes in a room, I got given a passage, I completely misinterpreted it. Or I think I missed the point that at the end they were talking about someone who had died. And I just, kind of hadn't got that until I got prodded to like draw that conclusion, which again, they
lead you in the right direction.
Yeah. And if they know you're struggling, they don't kind of sit there and leave you to flounder, which I think is different from actual tutorials, because sometimes in a tutorial, if you have no idea what's going on, a tutor will just sit there in silence until you come out with something.
But they aren't ever going to leave you without the answer at the end of it.
Yeah, that's very true. I
mean, this as well, though, what you don't want to do is just to freeze up and just go, oh, I don't know. What you need to do is you whatever you say, you need to think. It might not be the right thing, but as long as you say something, not something random, but as long as it has something to do with what you're talking about and you can form a conclusion from it, it doesn't matter if it's the wrong one.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to make, actually, that whilst there's no right or wrong answer, probably the only wrong answer is I don't know.
Nothing.
Full stop. Yeah. You kind of need to come out with something, even if it's just like a complete guess.
Yeah. But I guess you have to be backed up by something as well.
Yeah.
Just form your own conclusions, even if they're wrong.
Just like have a stab in the dark, and it won't be something that difficult that it's just impossible to draw a conclusion from, because they're not going to give you like a text that's that hard. It should kind of be in the range of something that you would do in a tutorial. But so when you came out of your interviews, how did you feel?
Actually quite pleased. So I'd seen a few people crying around college, which put me off a bit, but I came out and I just felt like I just had a really nice chat, just a really good intellectual discussion. So I was really worried going in, but I actually felt quite secure afterwards. Knowing, if anything, that I'd got to speak to foremost experts in the world for half an hour. So if it didn't go well, it didn't matter at the end of that, because I'd had a good time and done my best. So and then I had to wait around a few days, which was a bit more nerve-wracking, but coming out of it, I felt good.
Yeah, no, I was similar, actually. Like, I had that feeling of coming out and being like, wow, that was really interesting. I didn't feel like I'd just been put under a lamp and grilled for half an hour. Like, I felt like there was some back and forth. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, which I think is kind of like a good indicator of like whether it's gone well or not, because you'll kind of know if you've just sat there and been like, oh, I don't know.
But it's not to me that if one of them doesn't go well, one of your interviews, what's a good thing about Oxford is that they give you second chances. So if they still think that you're good enough to be at Oxford, but possibly not quite good enough for the college you applied to, then they'll stick you in a pool and you can do interviews at other colleges. So you can end up doing, you've got several different chances, because you can do the same thing can happen at the next college. So you might actually end up having several different interviews. But that means it's sort of a good thing, because Oxford, the tutors know that you're good enough for Oxford. You're just a bit borderline for their college.
Yeah, which I think is one of the really horrible things about interviews, is that obviously they kind of book off 5 days or so that you'll be at the college, and for some subjects you'll just have one interview at one college and that's it. But they keep you around.
Either it went really well or really badly.
And then you wait every day to see if you've been signed up for another interview, and like I think it's important to just not deep it too much. Because
I was there from the Tuesday evening to the Saturday morning, because I arrived with the history students on the Tuesday and left with the modern languages students because they were afters on the Saturday. So I was there for a lot longer than everyone else. A lot of that was just because you can't spend your whole time stressing. You know, you put the work in. I spent, you know, Wednesday, you know, my interviews on Thursday, I spent that just looking over notes and things. But then for the rest of it, I'd had my interviews. I didn't want to spend my whole time there just being stressed, so I actually just played Jenga and put the post-it note game, or you know, watched University Challenge with people in the JCR, and I had a really fun time doing that. And
Yeah.
I was lucky not to have other interviews as well, but I think much better to do that and then be relaxed for your next interview than to spend your whole time stressing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of credit to the people who run the interviews that help out at the colleges, because when I was there, they put on loads of events. Like, we went to G&D's, which is an ice cream place. There was like movie nights, things like that, which it's nice to just have on. And as well, like, you kind of met different people as well, and
it shows you what college life is going to be like, because I did that a lot in college, and it's college societies and JCR nights, evenings, watching movies and things like that. So it gets you a bit more of a feel of what university life is going to be like.
Yeah, what were your first impressions of what university life was going to be like then?
Well, I thought it was fantastic. Just although it felt like a long time to stay there, I got to see what eating in hall was going to be like, what the food was going to be like, what the accommodation was. The atmosphere of the college was really friendly. Although everyone was a bit stressed because of interviews, I met some really lovely people at interviews. And so I came out of it feeling like I would belong in a place like this, and I'd be happy at a place like this, which is always a good sign. Yeah,
and also it's really important to point out that Trinity has got the best food in Oxford. Like,
it does. Just
if you're ever thinking of applying to college based on like culinary purposes, go to Trinity.
No, I genuinely, that's because it's so hard to choose between colleges. All everyone told me is that every college you apply to, you will be happy there and you will think it's the best college. So I thought, okay, so the reasons I applied to Trinity was it has a non-auditioning orchestra and was known for having the best food in Oxford. And those are my only reasons. I don't think you can really play a game or seeing, oh, I'm more likely to get into this college than that college, because if one college doesn't want you, then you have a chance at a different college anyway. So there's no point playing it like that. Just choose one where you think you'll be happiest.
Yeah, and I guess like open days are so important because you can go around, like, get a feel for different colleges. I mean, I say this, when I went to the open days, I looked around departments and didn't really look around any colleges. So then when it came to choosing a college, I Google imaged Oxford colleges and chose the one that I thought looked nicest. Which it worked really well, because that's where I ended up.
Generally, I think everyone turns out happiest where they end up going. And even if you apply to one college for interviews and you end up in a different college, don't worry about it. You may have had your heart set on that college for one reason or for another, but you will absolutely think the college you end up at is the best one to be at.
100%. Because like I've got a friend who interviewed at Brasenose, and he liked it. But then interviewed at Trinity, and then with hindsight he was like, oh yeah, I think Trinity is the place for me. Which I guess it's hard to talk about interviews from a student perspective, because we don't know what the tutors kind of look out for, what their system is, and what kind of pushes you from being in one college to being in another. But I think it's important to just trust in the system.
Oh, absolutely. And trust that all they care about is how you think. They're not going to judge you based on what clothes you wear to interviews. Don't worry about having to look smart. You can go in there frankly in pajamas, but as long as you actually respond to what they tell you, well, the questions that they ask you, whether incorrectly or correctly, they aren't going to care what you look like or what you wear or how you talk.
100%. And I think that's probably one of the big misconceptions about going to an Oxford interview, is that like you need to look the part, you need to speak with received pronunciation, you need to like sort of give off that like, oh, I'm an Oxford student. But there is no
Oxford student.
No, not at all. So yeah, so if you were going to go through the whole experience again, would you do anything differently?
So I think at the time I'd probably said give myself a lot more time to prepare, because I was living in Spain and then in France before, or from August, and I was working full time teaching, as well as preparing. So things are quite stretched, and I felt quite stressed at a lot of times. But now looking back on it, I think it's also quite a good thing, being stressed, because the usual application is you're at school, you've got your A levels to prepare for, and if you start preparing too early, or sure, you can start preparing early, but I think it's also a good thing, for Oxford to see that you can handle pressure and time management. So yeah, I may have given myself more time, with hindsight, but knowing then that I was able to do all of that with all of the time pressures, I think it's probably useful for when I started Oxford anyway, because you've just got to be able to manage your time no matter what else is going on. You want to go to all of your societies, you want to see your friends, you want to go out, all of that sort of stuff, and you've got to make sure your university work gets done as well. So just, yeah, make sure you manage your time. And so yeah, I don't think I would actually change anything, because yeah, fill your time up so you don't get too stressed, don't over prepare, because again that'll lead you to wanting to search for being asked particular questions or respond looking to answer particular questions, and not actually have the fluidity to just answer what they ask you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, relax. I
Yeah.
think that's what I'd say. Relax, don't put too much pressure on yourself. If an interview goes badly, you'll probably most likely would have another shot, and otherwise, yeah, just enjoy the experience of being there. There's nothing you can change, and if it does go back, or it doesn't go how you wanted and you don't end up getting in, you still made it to interviews, and that's absolutely fantastic. And you got to have that time chatting to foremost experts in the world. I think that's invaluable in itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think you're dead right. I think it is just important to relax. Think on the spot. Thinking on the spot isn't a bad thing at all. And yeah, and enjoy the experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, you kind of
But
answered my yeah. Do prepare, like focus on the important things, like what you've said on your personal statement. Make sure that's all true. Be prepared to talk about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess kind of know your subject as much as possible, but you don't really need to know it outside of what you're doing for your A levels, because that's the most they're going to ask you, is like what kind of things you're studying, what you enjoy doing. They're not going to ask you things that they know that you won't know.
No, and also, so because I applied whilst I was on my year abroad, I didn't have any practice interviews, and I came there, and some people had 8 or 9 practice interviews before coming, and that was something that made me feel a bit out of place. But I think that's again comes down to, frankly, Oxford will know if you're over rehearsed. You don't want things to sound rehearsed. You just want things to sound natural. If it's, sure, you might not be able to get tons of practice interviews with your teachers, but maybe talk things over with your parents or a friend or something beforehand. It's more just a matter of confidence. If you have the confidence just to answer questions and not freeze up, then you'll be absolutely fine. And that doesn't matter whether you've had 100 practice interviews or none. Just make sure that you feel happy in yourself when you go there.
Speaking of practice interviews, I had 2 practice interviews at my 6th form, and they were nothing like what the actual interviews were. So for a mock interview for beginners German, I got given a passage in Polish, and I was asked to figure out what it meant. Which I was lucky, because I kind of knew like 1 or 2 words in Polish. Like I knew like one word meant I, and some words looked kind of like English. I was like, I think that says science. And then in my French interview, I got asked to say a joke in French and to explain why it was funny in English, which is kind of like a good thing to know. It was interesting, and I knew a joke off the top of my head that I'd read in a carambar, which is like a French caramel sweet thing that had jokes on the inside of the wrapper. So I kind of regurgitated one of those and then had to explain why it was funny, which I think it was good interview practice, because my Oxford interview was so much more relaxed and normal than that.
Yeah. Well, I think, yes, I don't think Oxford would expect you to remember a joke in a language that you haven't studied yet.
Yeah, exactly. Like you say, they do just want to have like an intellectual discussion. They're not trying to like
That's the thing as well. If you do get put off by the practice interviews, or you think, oh, my practice interview didn't go very well, do I really think I'm going to do that well at actual interviews? Yeah, don't worry, because the chances are things will go entirely differently from the practice interview in the first place. There's no way you can fully prepare, which is incredibly daunting, but everyone's in the same boat. So, and they aren't trying to catch you out.
Yeah, exactly. And no two Oxford interviews are the same either, because it will vary from college to college, and different tutors have different ways of doing it. So there's no way to actually have a mock interview that's in any way going to represent how you'll get interviewed by one specific tutor.
No.
So that's important to remember. You kind of already answered my last question, but just to kind of make the point again, what would be your key piece of advice that you give to people who've got an interview?
Interviews aren't going to be anything like as scary as people make them out to be. All they want to do is test to see how you think. So as long as you're genuinely interested in the subject, you've looked at, or you've done a bit of research, you've read some books on it, or you've maybe watched some documentaries on it, and you can prove that you genuinely want to do this, because you are committing at least 3 years of your life to doing this, then you should be fine. So don't freeze up. Just if you do find yourself freezing up, just try to stay calm, don't panic, and realize that these people are here to help you. All they want to do is help you talk through how you think, to see whether you'll do well in a similar environment at Oxford. So yeah, don't panic, stay calm, and it'll be fine. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
No problem.
It's been great to hear from you. Thank you to everyone who's listened. Please make sure to check us out on social media, on YouTube at Oxford from the Inside, Instagram Oxford from the Inside, Facebook, all that the same name. And yeah, until the next podcast, everyone take care, and yeah, bye.
Bye.